The threat from the Kremlin is getting closer. The European Union is preparing to confront Putin at the borders of Russia and Belarus. NATO countries are concentrating weapons and manpower. At the same time, members of the European Parliament are seriously working on a military Schengen.
We must show Putin that Europe is no longer associated with impotence and democracy with weakness.
The Schengen is being prepared in close cooperation with the North Atlantic Alliance. Brussels is taking decisive steps. Among them is a plan to modernize the defense industrial complex. The European Commission has announced the timeline and presented a new package of military mobility measures. This will enable the European army to move quickly across EU territory without facing excessive bureaucracy, especially in the event of a possible threat from Russia.
We will be strong in the defense industry if we are industrially independent, autonomous, and much less fragmented.
Ukraine is acting as an ally. The country will gain access to defense logistics.
We want to expand the military mobility corridors in Ukraine. This would effectively serve as a robust security guarantee, meaning that we could readily provide much faster support if ever it were truly needed.
The first and foremost priority is to modernize our essential infrastructure, digitize all existing procedures, and also significantly increase necessary funding. One of the key challenges for EU countries remains ensuring the rapid transport of troops to potential combat zones.
We can respond to these threats either symmetrically or asymmetrically. We have the full arsenal of tools at our disposal.
At present, the threat to the Baltics remains, and in the event of a sudden escalation, for example, the French army would need to cover about 1,500 kilometers to come to the aid of its allies. Although light units are able to move relatively quickly, heavy equipment requires significantly more time and preparation.
Currently, European bridges and railways are not suited for the rapid movement of tanks, soldiers, and military cargo. When transporting tanks from the west to the eastern flank, they can get stuck in tunnels, tangled in complex bureaucracy, and bridges may not be able to support the weight of these vehicles.
Drawing on the experience of the Russian Federation's war with Ukraine, the European Union has devoted significant attention to modernizing critical infrastructure. Transport routes will be upgraded to dual-use standards so that they can serve both civilian and military needs at the same time. The military Schengen plays a special role in strengthening the defense of the Eastern Alliance, especially for the Baltic states and Poland.
Everything depends on our stance, whether we can deter the enemy or encourage them to act aggressively.
But not everyone sees the threat from Russia, or they simply try to turn a blind eye to reality by maintaining close ties with the Kremlin dictator Putin.
We're talking about an armament program that will require us to spend every last penny, and this concerns all of Europe. From the statements of several influential leaders, it's quite clear they want to enter the war.
Germany is doing everything it can to help Ukraine, making every effort to equip the Ukrainian armed forces with long-range missile systems, as well as to organize joint production on our territory.
For several months now, we have been working intensively with the Ukrainian government to implement long-range weapons projects. The Ukrainian army is being equipped with such systems. We have agreed not to discuss the details publicly, as we believe that the Russian side should not be informed about the extent of our military support. I can only say that we are doing everything possible to equip the Ukrainian army with weapon systems of the required range. And the number of such systems will increase in the coming weeks and months if necessary, up to and including the production of such weapons in Ukraine itself.
The European Union's military budget is planned to be increased to more than 17 billion euros. In total, at least 100 billion euros are needed to modernize bridges and tunnels and to fully launch 4 corridors for military needs in the European Union. Putin's words cannot be trusted based on Ukraine's experience.
There's no need to make anything up, and based on these inventions, to form an opinion about Russia. There's no need to create an image of Russia as the enemy. They've made up this idea that Russia wants to attack NATO. Are you completely out of your mind or what? You're as dumb as this table, honestly. Who came up with this? It's nonsense, you understand? Utter nonsense.
While the dictator is feeding journalists lies, members of the European Parliament are calling for regular joint exercises and loading tests. They want the European Union to follow NATO's example so that rapid reaction forces can respond swiftly to Kremlin aggression.
There's no need to make things up and then, based on these inventions, form an opinion about Russia. There's no need to create an image of Russia as the enemy. You've made up this idea that Russia wants to attack NATO. Have you completely lost your minds or what? You're as dumb as this table, honestly. Who came up with this? It's nonsense, you understand? Utter nonsense.
The Kremlin has begun preparations for war against Poland.
We are now closer than ever to open conflict since World War II.
This is a pre-war situation. The General Staff has announced a planned attack.
The aggressor has begun preparations for war. He is creating an environment meant to undermine public trust in the government, the army, and the police, in order to set the stage for potential aggression against Polish territory.
The chief of the General Staff of Poland stated that recently there has been a significant increase in acts of sabotage and large-scale cyber attacks in the country. These events may indicate that Russia is creating conditions to destabilize the situation and weaken the state from within. One of the most recent such incidents was an explosion on the Warsaw-Lublin railway line.
Analyzing all the incidents that have occurred in Poland and Europe, one can say that all the traces lead east to Muscovy.
Polish authorities believe that this episode and other similar cases bear the hallmarks of pre-planned operations that may be linked to the activities of foreign intelligence services.
The sabotage of the railway line on the Warsaw-Lublin route. This is an unprecedented act of sabotage, directed specifically against the security of the Polish state and its civilian population. We will catch those responsible, whoever they may be.
2 months earlier, about 20 Russian drones entered Polish territory en masse for the first time. Poland's security services stated that the drone threat was more serious than the authorities had previously believed.
The claim that these were cardboard and paper objects is not entirely true.
The Polish leadership does not hide the fact that it is preparing for a direct confrontation.
We can respond to these threats either symmetrically or asymmetrically. We have the full arsenal of tools at our disposal.
Military analyst and former SBU officer Ivan Stupak is convinced that the Kremlin is already waging a hybrid war against Europe, and the only question is when it will escalate into an open conflict.
For Russia, what it is currently doing in Europe is already a war. Asymmetric, non-linear, hybrid. Call it what you will, but it is ongoing.
Poland's strategic position between the Kaliningrad region and Belarus makes it one of the key countries for the security of all Nato. And Warsaw itself plays an important role in ensuring the defense of the eastern flank. Subsequently, the defense of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania will directly depend on the ability of Polish forces to respond to potential threats in a timely manner.
Everything depends on our stance. Will we be able to deter the enemy, or will we encourage them to act aggressively?
While most European countries spent many years discussing the potential threat from Russia, Poland was engaged in systematic and targeted preparation. Over the past decades, Warsaw has significantly strengthened its military potential, and the buildup of its defense capabilities began immediately after Russia's annexation of Crimea.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
While other countries waited to see who would make the first move, Poland took action.
In 2024, Poland's defense budget rose to 4.7% of its GDP. This is the highest figure among all NATO member states. Modernization of military equipment and an increase in troop numbers to more than 200,000 make the Polish army one of the largest in Europe. In addition, Poland has become one of the largest purchasers of weapons from the United States. The country has invested about $50 billion.
Without the United States, there is no alliance. We need to spend more on defense not to replace the Americans in Europe, but to keep them here.
Poles are tired of the war going on in the neighboring country, and as a result, their attitude toward Ukrainians has worsened. The Polish Minister of Defense stated that people are not seeing the main enemy, and those who incite against Ukraine are acting against Poland.
This should be valued and respected, not used to incite hostility against Ukrainians in Poland or to fuel anti-German sentiment.
The chief of the Polish General Staff called for the creation of a Cold War 2.0, large-scale investment in defense, and making it clear to Moscow that any attack on NATO would receive a decisive response. Now, the future of European countries depends on NATO's readiness to defend itself.
They are acting proactively. Finland is deploying 15,000 troops to the border with Russia. The Finns are preparing for the largest series of military exercises of the year. Conscripts, reservists, professional soldiers, as well as units from allied countries, Sweden and the United Kingdom will take part in them. According to the country's ground forces, the purpose of the maneuvers is to test the army's readiness to defend the state and to strengthen cooperation with NATO allies.
These are NATO's countermeasures in response to the aggressive actions of the occupying country. On the territory of the occupying country, in direct proximity to the Finnish border, there is currently intensive engineering construction of new military bases for the occupying country's army. This includes Petrozavodsk, Kandalaksha, and other settlements within the Russian Federation, which indicates the redeployment of Russian army units directly near Finland's borders.
One of the largest episodes will be the Liveli Sentry exercise, which will take place in southern Finland from November 27th to December 4th. It will involve about 7,000 participants.
The Russian Federation has constantly made it clear to Finland that it poses a threat to this country. Moreover, there was a constant element of military political pressure on Finland, with the aim, accordingly, of maintaining its so-called neutral status. In other words, there is absolutely no basis to claim that after the occupation of Finnish lands, friendly or good neighborly relations were established. The Russian military presence near the border with Finland has been constantly increasing.
In the spring of 2023, Finland became a member of the North Atlantic Alliance. This provoked a sharp reaction from Russia, worsening bilateral relations. In addition, Finland imposed sanctions against Russia and refused to grant asylum to Russians fleeing mobilization, after which Putin's lackeys began blaming the Finns for every sin at every opportunity. For example, in September, former ALCO president Dmitry Medvedev decided that Finland was preparing to attack Russia.
After joining NATO under the guise of defensive measures, Helsinki is pursuing a confrontational course, preparing for war with Russia, apparently setting up a springboard for an attack on us.
Moreover, according to him, Russia supposedly legally deserves reparations from the Finns for World War II. He claims that back then, they paid far too little thanks to the goodwill of the Russians.
This is actually an element of diplomatic military pressure on Finland. Moreover, similar statements are being made not only regarding Finland, but also accordingly regarding Sweden, specifically about the island of Gotland, and likewise regarding Poland.
Following the alcoholic Medvedev, the chairman of the State Duma Defense Committee, Andrei Kartapolov, also made aggressive statements. He stated, or rather threatened, that Russia is ready to defend itself at any moment since they have everything they need. Medvedev also spoke about this earlier.
We absolutely cannot ignore the significant fact that Finland is currently a full member of the North Atlantic Alliance. And this profoundly predetermines substantial changes in our military approaches to organizing the entire border and to effectively repelling any possible unfriendly acts or potential aggressions.
The political and military leaders of Finland are doing everything they can to emphasize that an attack by Russia would be an act of suicidal madness.
The Russian Federation is demonstrating its readiness for a direct confrontation with the NATO bloc, and accordingly, the first countries that will be in the focus of the occupying country's army are respectively Finland and the Baltic states. Therefore, the risks are quite high. This is also evidenced by the formation of new military units in the Leningrad military district and accordingly the deployment of military infrastructure directly near the border with Finland.
Earlier, it became known that Finland had offered NATO to establish a new military base on its territory. Helsinki could become a base for large NATO reconnaissance drones.